Hey everybody, it's Brad with another Floriani Total Control U video for you today. Today we're going to take a look at some of the new custom shapes that are now built into the software that didn't used to be. And we're going to talk about a couple of helpful buttons that I haven't really talked about much in any of my videos. Let's just go ahead and jump in and get started. Alright, so you're going to look at your My Floriani Today page, hit Create a New Design. And with your blank space, we're going to move our mouse up to this icon here. No, not that icon. Yeah, this icon here, the Shapes tool. And you click on that, and you'll get this little flyout menu with some shapes. These are the buttons that we would use to draw in a rectangle, circle, triangle, pentagon, or hexagon. But right below that, we see this thing, Custom Shape. We'll left click on that, and what you will see is this menu here. It remembered that I had it on easy shapes before, and if you haven't looked in this for a while, if you've had the software for a long time, you'll see that there's actually more in here than there used to be. But that's not what I mean by the new custom shapes that we didn't have before. If you click on here where it says Folder, and one of the options here will be Easy Art, if you left click on this Easy Art, look at all of this cool stuff. So the difference between these things and these things, custom shapes, is that these custom shapes are all one color, and they're all just outlines. Even these ones that look like they're filled in here, really it's just an outline. And there's not multiple colors, multiple layers. Each one of these is just the outline that you're looking at. So if we pick any of these, it's just one color, just a solid thing or an outline depending on what button we hit. So there we've got just an outline in a straight stitch, or we could fill it in with a fill stitch. Pretty basic stuff, really useful for a lot of things. But what we're going to look at are these new ones in Easy Art, which these are pretty neat. So the way that these work is the letters are just artwork letters, which we could bring in our own TrueType fonts. I've got videos on doing that for bringing in your own custom letters, so I'm not that excited about having all of these letters in this, but this other stuff is actually pretty neat. These are different little pictures, like here's a pirate's cutlass we can bring in. And what this is something that would be no different than if we had this as a clip art that we imported and then drew in ourselves. Meaning we can just instantly digitize each part of this thing. So we can select an individual section and apply stitches to that section, and we don't have to draw anything. So that's pretty neat. So if you want to go in and select some of those and play with them, you can go right ahead. We're gonna pick one and actually digitize the whole thing, though. I'm just kind of playing with this, just clicking on different digitizing buttons, and that's a good way for you to learn what your different digitizing tools do. Is to play with this kind of thing, especially if you find it challenging to draw your own artwork. You can get a feel for what different types of stitches look like without having to first struggle to bring in the artwork yourself. So it's pretty neat, and there's a ton of these. I'm just going to go ahead and select this whole thing. I can either hit all items here, or I could hit Control A, or I could draw a box around it by clicking and dragging. And then once I've got everything highlighted, I can just hit this this black X here in the top left corner of my selection box, or I could hit the delete key. Million ways to do everything in this program. Alright, so let's open this back up. I'm going to pick one that I want us to digitize. Let's see. There was one that I was playing with earlier. It was a pumpkin. And even though it is not fall yet, it is still the middle of summer, I'm going to do this pumpkin. Okay, so this is SS001. This is the one that I want you to do, and you can follow along with me. So I'm just going to leave it at the default size that it comes in at. I'm going to zoom in a little bit by scrolling my mouse wheel forward, or I could just click on this magnifying glass in my selection box, and it will fill the entire design field with my design. So if we were going to digitize this pumpkin, there are a couple of things that we can do that would be helpful to us in doing that. So if we look at our sequence view here, we can see that we've got three colors. Okay, so we've got this green, that's the stem, and the orange is the filled in part of the pumpkin, and the kind of maroon color is the border around this. And if we hit the little plus sign next to any of these, we can see the individual elements that make them up. And we can select these one at a time. And any of these that we select, we could hit a button and digitize. So if I hit this standard fill button right now down here at the bottom, you can't see it because it's coming off of my screen, but there's a little thing that'll pop up and say standard fill if you hover your mouse over this. If I click this, then it'll fill this area in with just a flat fill stitch, which is a perfectly good stitch for this kind of thing. But if you're looking at a design like this, and I just hit the undo button to undo that, that was just an example. If you're looking at this kind of thing and you're wondering, well, I don't know what the right type of stitch is, there's a couple of things you can do to be able to tell what the right type of stitch is for any given area. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to only be looking at this tool here. Let me just select it so that they light up. I just need to have something selected for the digitizing tools at the bottom to light up. But we're going to look at this tool here, which is the run, this one that just kind of looks like a little bendy line. We're going to be looking at this tool here, which is the automatic satin stitch. That just puts in a satin stitch in whatever area you click on. And we're going to look at this tool here, which is a standard fill. So we've got this tool, and this tool are the only three we're going to really go by for the purposes of this video. And conveniently, if we go over here to this ruler tool, we can left click on that, and you see that my mouse is now turned into this little ruler with a crosshair. If we find kind of the widest part of this design and we click at one end of that and drag it down to the other, you see the little tooltip that's coming up? It's telling me what type of stitch it recommends I use for each little area. So right here, this is about as wide as this gets, and if I go from here to here, it's telling me to use a satin stitch for that. A satin stitch is going to be the right tool for the job there. And this one is really one of the wider ones in this whole little green area. So yeah, I can go and look at these, and I can see that each one of these, the tool is going to recommend that I use a satin stitch for it. Now, if I go and measure something else, like maybe one of these big orange parts, this will also tell me what type of stitch to use. It's telling me to use a fill stitch for that. And a big wide open area like this, it's always going to tell you to use a fill stitch. And then we've got this kind of thick border region here. We can measure that, and that's telling me to use a satin stitch. Okay, and then we've got these kind of narrower sections in here, and these we go, and it's going to tell me to use a bean run, but it's kind of just right on the line between bean run and satin. So we can kind of pick which one we want. So we'll pick which one we think looks best for that when we get to it. But for now, we've been told that all the green should be a satin, and I told you that if you're doing a satin, I want you to work with this tool here, the auto satin tool. It's the kind of blue, looks like a caterpillar curve a little bit, I guess, because it's got little caterpillar hairs on it. And then if it tells us to use a fill, we're going to use this one, and if it tells us to use a run, we're going to use this one. But let's go ahead and get started. We can go in and select each area just by clicking on it like this in the sequence view. And if you don't see this broken up, hit the little plus sign here. If you don't see them broken out with these individual pieces and it looks like this, that means you haven't hit the little plus sign yet. So we click on that, and then we can see each piece. We're going to click the first one in the line, and then we're going to go ahead and hit the auto satin down here. We're just left click that one time. Boom. Okay, and we've got our satin stitch has now filled this area in. Wonderful. And we can simply go down to the next one and select it and hit the auto satin tool again. There we go. And notice it's broken this satin stitch into two pieces here. And if you don't like that it did that, well, with the auto satin tool, you kind of just have to take the results that you're given. But if instead you want to tell it what direction to have the stitches go yourself, you can, instead of using the auto satin tool, let me just go ahead and select this again. Instead of using the auto satin tool, you can use the manual satin tool, which is this first one in the line. So the first one over here just says regular satin when you hover over it. Now, I know you can't see where mine says satin all the way. It's just because of the way that my screen is being recorded, it doesn't show it. But when you hover yours over this, it will say satin. We left click on that And what happens is our mouse turns into this little crosshair with a dot on it. And what we do is we left click and drag from one side of the shape to the other, and we can define what direction the stitches are going to go. And then once you've done that, then you just right click and then right click again, and see, now we have this as one continuous stitch. It doesn't break it into two pieces. So, if you want to do that, you can. If you're feeling adventurous, you can do it that way. Or you can just take whatever result the Auto Satin tool gives you. And then we're going to go ahead and select the next one in the sequence here. In our sequence view, we select this one. We're going to select that and hit the Auto Satin tool again. Now this one, it's going to break up into two pieces also. See where this one kind of goes to here, and then it's a separate piece that goes to here. And we want that because this has what's called branching, where the shape kind of branches out like that. So that's a good thing that it did at that time. We'll go ahead and select the next one, and we'll hit the Auto Satin tool once again. Fills that in really nice, and the last bit here, and there we go. Okay, so we selected each one of these individually and applied the stitch that we were told to use on them, which was the satin tool. Now, what we could have also done is, because each one of these shapes was going to be a satin tool, what we could have done is selected the entire group, which would be this top icon here in our sequence view. That would select this entire group, and we could have hit Auto Satin. So let's go ahead and do that for our next set of shapes, which are going to be these shapes that make up the body of the pumpkin. I'm going to go ahead and select that. I'm not going to break open the shape this time. I'm just going to select the whole color, and then I'm going to go, and remember, it told us to use a fill here. If we forget, we can go back and use our ruler tool and measure again. Yep, use a fill stitch. So we're going to make sure that we use this tool here, this tool here, the standard fill. I'm going to go back to my select tool. That lets me click on this purple star. I'm going to click it, and boom, there we go. We've got all our fills are done in one click. Okay, so we didn't have to sit there and manually select each one. It went ahead and did it for us. And then the next set of lines is going to be this one. Now, we could go ahead and do this one separately, and you see each one of these is its own shape, there to there to there to there. All of these are kind of their own deal. And then all the way down to these real skinny lines. Remember, we could kind of have chosen to do these as a run stitch or as a fill stitch. I'm thinking that we're going to want to do, or not a fill stitch, a satin stitch. I'm sorry if I'm confusing you. We could do these as a run stitch or a satin stitch. I'm thinking, because of the nature of the way these shapes are, which is, I'm going to pull this out and so we can see it a little bit better. Because of the way this shape is, it's actually got two sides to it. Even though it's narrow, if we make this a run stitch, you know what it's going to do? I'm going to go ahead and click it to show you. It makes it a run outline of this thing, and that's just not what we want. So unless we want to draw this in ourselves again, what we'll do is we'll actually make it, and I only pulled that out so that you could see it. You don't have to do that. We're just going to go ahead and make all of it a satin stitch and see how it shakes out, just see how that looks. So we're going to go ahead and select this whole group here. And the tool we're going to use is the Auto Satin tool, this one down here, right next to our purple star. You hover your mouse over it, it'll say Auto Satin. Left click on that one time, and boom. There we go. That looks pretty good, I think. So these, even though they're super, super narrow, that's okay. We'll just let it be a really narrow satin stitch. It's not ideal for digitizing, really. If I was digitizing this manually from the start, I would have drawn those shapes in as straight lines instead of a closed-in shape. But then if we went ahead and made this design a little bit bigger, then it would make our shapes a little bit wider just by virtue of getting bigger, and then it would be, more along the lines of something that the software would tell us to use a satin stitch for anyway. I just went ahead and left it at the default size. So once you see how this basic method works, you can actually go in and have some fun with different settings on these. So I can select this, say this filled in area here, and so I told you to just worry about the first purple star, But we've got these other purple stars. So this is a standard fill. And we can actually play with the properties of this too. If you look in our properties menu here, before we start going to the different buttons we could hit, we could go in and change the pattern that this is filled in with. We can change this from pattern 1 to all of these different types of patterns. So say one of my favorite ones is actually random. I think this looks really good in a lot of applications. We'll select pattern random and hit apply, and it creates a cool textured look. It kind of like randomly changes the stitch direction slightly, and the way it puts the stitches down in it, and it makes a nice looking texture. Much more interesting, I think, than the standard pattern fill. So you can go through and pick these different ones to see what the different patterns look like, and choose one that you think looks best. We also are able to adjust the stitch density. The default density is 0.5 millimeters, and if you decrease this value, then you can see these stitch points. It's kind of like a preview of your stitch points. If you decrease this value, then that makes it more dense. So there's more stitching. So if you sew your design out and you realize that you can see through the stitches onto the material below, then you could go ahead and decrease that value a little bit and see whether you can't get your stitch to look nicer. Or conversely, if it's too heavy, you could increase this value. Say it's puckering really bad or something, you could increase this value and make the design a little bit less dense. But generally, if you do that, then you start to be able to see through the design. Another way you could decrease density without changing this value, though, is to change the stitch length. So if you change this value from the default 3.5 to 5, it makes each stitch that's inside of here longer, and it will change the way your pattern looks a little bit, but it doesn't make it any more or less amount of lines that it's putting in. It's just increases the length of the stitch, which makes it less dense but has the same amount of lines. So that's one thing that's a good idea to do. If you're going to decrease this value, it's a good idea to increase this value to keep your density around the same, your stitch count around the same. So that's just some stuff that we can play with in there. But we also have these other tools down here, these other stars that do different things. So we could also choose a fancy fill, and what this is it's a fill stitch that has a pattern embossed over it. So when we look under pattern here, we have a much larger variety of types of stitches to choose from. So there we go. We see we've got all of these different fancy patterns to choose from. And you can just experiment with those and see which ones you think look good. We also have a motif fill, which fills in with kind of like these different decorative stitches. Some of them look like netting. Some of them look like little swirlies like this. Okay. The problem with the motif stitches right now is, for some reason, somebody, when they changed some settings in the program when they were doing an update, they made it so that the default stitch length for all of these is 0.4 when it's supposed to be 4. Not 5, 4. Okay, and hit apply, and if you sew these out with the stitch length set to 0.4, it doesn't work. So hopefully at some point in the future Floriani will fix that. But just keep that in mind. If you use any of these motif fills, you need to change the stitch length value at least to 2.5 or above. I usually use 4. But that's just something to be aware of. And let's see, we've got these other fills in here too. A gradient fill, which what this does is it kind of goes from less dense to more dense, kind of a more advanced thing, because you have to really play with these settings in here. We've also got a color blend where it blends two colors together. Again, to get this to look right, you really have to do a lot of fiddling. I wouldn't recommend playing with that too much when you get started. This fill, though, the wave fill, is a lot of fun, where what it does is it puts in a wavy fill pattern, and then you can change this density to more along the lines of a standard fill and really kind of get an interesting look. So we set that to 0.5, and that kind of fills in with this interesting wavy look. And then there's also a gradient wave and a wave color blend, with the same caveats as the standard color blend and gradient, i.e. don't mess with them right now. But anyway, I'm just going to set this back to a standard fill for right now, and I'm going to put it on a random pattern because I really do like the way that looks. Okay, so there's some other stuff that we can do to kind of make our design work out a little bit better than it currently is. Now, one of the things that I did at some point, I'm not sure when this happened, but if you look, see how each one of these shapes is its own color now? It's kind of a mystery to me sometimes why the software does what it does, but if you've got a whole bunch of colors like this, and you see that they're not combined into one, what you can do is select your whole design using this All Items button here. We'll just click on All Items, and if yours has done this, or if yours has not done this, then just follow along with what I do, because it'll do it to you at some point in your digitizing career. But we want to combine all of these back into a single color change, and all we have to do that is go up to this icon here. It says color sort. If you hover your mouse over it, you left click on that and it will combine them. See, it reduced 6 colors. It combined all those colors back into one, the way I would have expected it to be. Excuse me. Now let's go ahead and watch our design sew out here. We're just gonna hit the play button here. Notice this little line that shows the colors that are in our design. If we hit play here, it will simulate sewing out the design, and we can see it go ahead and sew out. We can change the speed here so it goes slower, or we can make it go faster with this slider. And we can watch our design sew out. So we can see this goes from here, and then it goes to here. And then it jumps over to here. And then down. I'm just going to make it go a little faster by dragging it. And then it jumps back over to this side. And then back to here. And then it finally does the center one there. Now that's not the order that I would probably do this. If I were digitizing this manually, I would have it so that it just starts in one side and kind of just goes all the way around. So that there's a minimal amount of either jump stitches if your machine doesn't cut jump stitches, or cuts if it's going to cut. And we can watch this Satin Stitch kind of does it in a funny order too. Look, it sews out this top part, and then it sews out this part, and then it jumps all the way over here. Now, see, this is just not the way that I would do it. Luckily, instead of having to go in and manually reorder our design, there are some helpful automatic tools that will help us out with this. So one thing is the sequence, that is, what order the design sews out in. And if you select everything by clicking on All Items, and then you click on the Sequence tool here, it's now changed the order that stuff sews out in whatever the computer thinks is going to be the right order. So let's see. This one, it sews out first this color, and then it goes to, this time it's going this way instead of this way, if you remember from the last time this sewed out. And notice everything kind of flows a little bit better from one shape to another. We got this one, and then the next one, and then it goes to the next one, and so on in a more reasonable order, and it's not jumping around from place to place. Now, I generally don't use the auto sequencer because there are some times when I'm digitizing a complicated design where I want to set my sequence myself. But if you don't know how to do that, this is way, way better than not having any sequencing at all. Similarly, this next tool that I'm going to show you is very, very, very helpful if you don't know how to set your start and your stop points, or you're just a beginner and aren't very confident with using the software. The start and the stop point of each element of our design is important because, and the way that we look at it, by the way, is we select the whatever object we're going to look at. So I'll just pick the first one in my line here, this first satin path, and then you hit this icon here. It looks like a little mouse pointing on a little dot. You left click on that, and we can see that this starts and stops in the same spot, and I can tell that because there's only a red dot here. There's a green dot, that's my start point, and there's a red dot, that's my stop point. And if you only see a red dot, that means that the green dot and the red dot, the start and the stop, are in the same place. And you can confirm that by moving your mouse over the red dot. See how a little green pops up there? If I left click and drag, that moves the start and the away from the stop point. We can see that would be where it starts, that would be where it stops. And you can manually set where you want your design to start and where you want it to stop. So I could manually set this to start here and then have it stop wherever I want the start point of the next one to be. So if I want it to stop here, and then I want the next one to have a start point, let's see, I'll have this one start down here. We can manually go in and set this for the whole design, but we don't actually have to. I'm going to again go to my select tool. I'm going to select the entire design, and then I'm going to left click on the optimize entry and exit points. Okay, now you have to have everything selected for this or it does not work. It only works on the objects you currently have selected. So make sure that all items are selected and then left click on optimize entry and exit. Okay, it does it. And now if we watch our design sew out, we'll see, well, it's kind of hard to see from this. Let's just look at the entry and exit points on here manually. Okay, so where has it chosen? I'm going to select the first one, and it has chosen my start point to be down here and my stop point to be up here. So I suspect that for this next segment, the start point is going to be right close to where the stop point is on this one. Let's see whether it did that. Go in here, click on this icon here, and we can see, yes, it started just here, and now it stopped right here. And what's the next object in line? It's this circle. So where do you think it's put the start point for this, well, oval? Where do you think it's put the start point for this oval? Just select it, go in here, and look at that, it's put it in just the right place. Now, these points are so close together that if you have a machine that cuts jump stitches, it will not cut them. And that's a good thing because we want to minimize the amount of cuts that our machine has to do, because the machine, when it cuts, it actually causes a lot of mechanical action to happen. And that's a point where if the machine is going to fail, that's where it's going to fail, is at a cut action a lot of the time. So we want to minimize those to minimize the amount of downtime we have with our machine. So then after it leaves this tiny jump, what's going to happen at the end? Our satin stitch is actually going to cover over that jump stitch anyway, so it never needed to be cut. So it's a win-win. It's perfect. So now that we've done this, all of our start and our stop, our start and our stop points are optimized, and our order that the design sews out is optimized. So that's really fun, and it's a really cool way to kind of learn the ins and outs of what has to be done in embroidery. And like I said, those tools don't always make the right decisions, but they will make better decisions than if you don't know how to do it at all. And then you can gradually learn from watching some of my more advanced videos the way to do it manually. Now, let's say we want to take this design and sew it out. What we would do is we would go to File and do either Save As, or if you want, you can do a Save to Sew, which will allow you to tell it what type of material you're sewing the design out on. And again, if you haven't watched any of my videos that teach you how to do pull compensation or how to minimize gapping, that might not be a bad idea. Let's take a look and see how that looks. Say we want to sew this design out. We go to Save to Sew. Okay, and we're going to tell it what type of material we're sewing this out on. So let's say I'm going to sew this design out on a towel. Okay, so we'll go under Type of Fabric. We're going to click the little line here, and this drop-down menu will come out, and we're going to look for towel. Okay, so we've got towel. And we did digitize this, so we're going to say towel I digitized, because we digitized this design. So that means we click on this. We are going to choose New Style Settings. We'll put a check mark next to this and make sure there's a check mark next to all of these. That's going to automatically change all our settings, like our pull compensation and our stitch density, the type of underlay, and all that groovy stuff that normally has to be set manually. We don't want to put a check mark next to Convert to Outlines. What that's for is if you're saving a design that you didn't digitize in the program, which honestly I don't recommend that you use Save to Sew for. I'm not getting into why here, but just trust me. If you do it and it doesn't work out right, I told you so. But so we're not going to really ever put a check mark next to this if we're following along with me. But anyway, we're going to hit Next now. And here it's going to recommend the types of stabilizer that you should use, and it'll even throw up a handy video to a tutorial on a handy video with a tutorial on how to use the recommended stabilizer. So that's pretty cool. I'm just going to go ahead and close that. And then there is instructions here that show you that, they're telling you, okay, if the design's large, blah, 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 float 1 or 2 layers of tearaway under the hoop. Okay, so and then you can click print here, and it'll print it if you want. And then when you're all done reading this, you hit finish, and that's when it asks you where you want to save it to. So you want to save it to your your USB flash drive, or save it direct to your machine, or wherever you want to save it, and then make sure you have this set to save as type to the brand software, the format that your machine uses. So if it's a Baby Lock or a Brother, it's PES. If it's a Viking, it's VP3 or whatever format your machine uses. You hit save, and it'll save both the stitch file and a working file. So you can go back and edit it later if you need to. So anyway, that is super basic digitizing, using these really neat easy art shapes. All of these basically work the same way that I just showed you. You could pick any of these and digitize them. It's a good exercise. I recommend you try it out, and leave me a note in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube if you managed to make anything neat. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good 4th of July.